Welcome back, listeners to Learning from Friends. My name is Cade Curtis, your tour guide in this lovely adventure that we get to do bi-weekly together. And today, as we're going into this, I am honored to be able to speak with artist, architect, photographer, poet, Joe Dreher, aka JOEKINGATL, down here in the new 4th Ward. It's next to old 4th Ward. It's just called 4th Ward, but I'm calling it the new 4th Ward. It used to be down here by, for those of Atlanteans that loved going to the Masquerade, kind of the area that used to be the big old parking lot back this way. We're sitting here under this beautiful landscape and wonderful night on the summer, and we're going to have a good time here tonight. But before we do that, we got to do my mom's quote of the day. Mom, take it away.
Your day doesn't have to be perfect to have meaning. Showing up matters. Giving matters. Trying matters. Loving matters. Being there matters. Perfection doesn't matter. You matter. Rachel Marie Martin.
Thank you, Mom. Always setting the tone for the podcast episode, making it feel like it is literally 80-something episodes into this now. It's so ingrained in the culture for it. So here we go. Joe, welcome to the podcast.
Buongiorno.
It's so good to have you. I'm sorry that we had all the troubles before coming into this tonight of trying to make this work. We had a tire go flat trying to get down here. I think it was trying to hold me back.
No worries. No pressure.
Hey, you got to have a good meal, some tapas and everything. So
Yes.
I think it kind of worked out in a little bit of a way. So the majority of the audience here, some people may see the name. They're like, okay, JOEKINGATL. Okay, cool. I'm gonna click on this. Some people are gonna go, JOEKINGATL. Who is that guy? Give us a background.
What
Tell
does
us
that mean?
What is a Wikipedia
I don't
page?
know,
Who is this
but
guy?
It's provocative.
It draws our attention. Who is JOEKINGATL?
I'm just a guy who likes to make stuff and has had the opportunity to, I feel like, live several lives in the time that I've been on this sphere that we exist on. To make a long story longer, I was born in Cape May, New Jersey. I was put up for adopted when I was around 3 years old, and had a pretty uneventful life up until the time I became a teenager and decided I wanted to go to college. Didn't have any money to do that, so went in the military, then went in the reserves and went to college and studied architecture.
Nice.
I practiced architecture for nearly 20 years, or maybe just over 20 years, and then had the Great Recession.
Oh gosh, that hit.
hit.
Woo.
And basically I had my own Great Depression as a result. Never had experienced any issues with mental health before, so I really didn't know what was, happening to me at the time. But what I do know is that I wasn't able to get out of bed some days. I had no real, desire to go out in the world, to interact with people. And I would have to say, unfortunately, that included my family. Like I was pretty absent. I was in the same house, but really wasn't there. I was there physically, but not emotionally, for my wife and my two boys. And I think at one point, my oldest son, Alex, had enough of that and basically said, you need to get up, you need to go out, you need to be present, you need to be my dad. And as a result, we came across an organization called Living Walls, which we volunteered for. And that really kind of was a turning point in all of our lives as a family. What we had discovered in a city like Atlanta, when you're struggling financially, which we were because of this recession that we had and closing my architecture practice, in a city like Atlanta, there's not a whole lot that you can do that doesn't cost money. If you want to go to the Botanical Gardens or the High Museum, or, you want to go see a show, you want to see the ballet, and so we weren't really connected with the art world at that point until Living Walls. What we experienced with Living Walls really was a kind of immediate, like a 2-week concentrated, because they have a 2-week conference. At that time, they brought artists from all over the world to spend 2 weeks here painting murals. And they got as many volunteers as they could get together and muster up to support that effort. And so at the encouragement of some faculty at Decatur High School, some counselors and faculty there, one of the teachers mentioned we should give Living Walls a try, not knowing what I did for a career or that I had any creative, skills, but just knowing that Alex drew in her class all the time,
Oh, I
and
love that.
it would be something that he would be interested in. And so he was not real excited about the idea of doing anything, with me or with us, but at my wife's insistence, I must say, we gave it a shot. And literally the first day we saw, a 13-year-old, kid go from being alone in his bedroom, drawing in his sketchbook, feeling a little alienated and different, because he's a creative, to being out on the streets of Atlanta with these artists and having these artists be just as interested in looking at his sketchbook as he was, looking at their artwork, and really kind of taking us and embracing us and kind of bringing us into the fold. And that night we went to the goat farm, which I hadn't been to in years at that point. And we had a dinner with the artists and volunteers. And midway through that dinner, he came up to my wife, Alex came up to my wife and said, "Mom, I feel like I met my people today."
Oh, see, that's a wonderful feeling.
Yeah, I mean, goosebumps.
Especially as a teenager, trying to find, I teach teenagers every day, and it's
to feel
trying
connected,
to find the interest
to feel
so
part of something. There's that story with Frida Kahlo and a young girl who wrote her a letter, that basically said, like, until I experienced your artwork, I felt alone in this world. And then I realized that there was someone else out there like me, and that's a profound moment for anybody, teenager, adult,
whoever it is. Gosh, that's game changer.
So we immediately kind of immersed ourselves in the Atlanta art scene, primarily because it really didn't cost anything.
Yeah.
All it took was our desire to do it and our willingness to show up,
And that's priceless in itself, is just the desire and willingness. You can't pay for that. And with someone's willingness to actually do something for it, they have to be given themselves.
And we found that there were other ways to pay for it, to, pay it forward maybe, or, like we volunteered with Glow and with Living Walls. And, we did a lot of volunteer work and gave our time because at that time that was what we could give, and I feel though that we benefited just as much from that volunteer work than the organizations that we volunteered with, so
that's amazing. You mentioned the famous one for me of Glow ATL there. That was how we kind of interacted first. It was you and Corey kind of got in and got connected in, and that's how, like, we kind of afterwards, and then years kind of continued. Once you get in the Glow family, you're kind of, everybody within that circle kind of sticks with each other,
right? Which
is always fun. But yeah, it's one of those things that it's very interesting how the art community can just grow.
Yeah.
And you can get absorbed in it simply just by willingness to be kind of around.
Just willingness to be there and partake and participate. Yeah. And sometimes we didn't know exactly what we were getting involved in, obviously, like when I ended up dancing with Glow for 5 shows, when they did the cloth.
Yeah, was the cloth?
With Robert Spano from the Atlanta Symphony Orchestra and about, I think, a dozen or so other non-dancers,
You were the bull, correct?
I was a bull, yes. We were first tasked with making masks, not knowing that we were really going to be included in the performance, like, so
that's Lori though.
Yeah.
That's Lori.
Like, here, try on this mask now that you've made, and then stand next to this dancer and now hold this dancer, Next thing you know, you're in costume and you're performing.
What was it 3 weeks worth of practices or 4 or
3
a month?
months.
3 months.
Yeah.
I can't remember how long it was.
Yes. And then he
Yeah,
knows,
because
your
you were
brother
the
knows
mouse. No, you weren't the mouse. The crane. That was it. Yeah, and the rest is history. We'll continue to grow with that connection with the goat farm, and then I was so honored that you were willing to take my wife and my wedding pictures there for our engagement photos before going to a wedding. And that was so amazing to get to have that, and then
the pleasure was mine, really, because I don't, I say photographer among the list of things that I do, but I've never really considered myself a serious or professional photographer. It's something that's part of everything that I do, pretty much, because most of my work is inspired by my photography, my street photography, or just, I feel like there's this whole world in front of us, and you go on social media these days and a lot of people's accounts, the camera's towards themselves,
Yep.
and I
Just
just
look around
feel
you. Yeah, just look.
at some point as I get up there in the years, I'm going to start forgetting all this stuff, and I want to be able to go back and look at it, remember the experiences that I've had, and not just remember what I looked like when I was young,
True. I always look at there's I can't think of the artist who did it, but it was in order to explain social media. It shows an apple staring at a mirror, and you see the very beautiful crisp apple in the front, and then you flip around back and you see the apple's kind of been eaten, the core's been eaten, everything, all the stuff, all the nits, but all you're seeing in the
Right,
social media is the
right.
beautiful,
All
but
the good stuff,
the
yeah.
ugly is actually, in my opinion, some of the most beauty that's
Well,
there because of a person behind what's on the facade is
yeah.
there. You can truly get to see a person whenever you actually get into their spaces of where they are, live amongst where they're doing, what's their day to day, in order to actually understand them better than just an image that's right there straight in front of them.
I think if you venture into my social media, you'll see that there is a combination of things that are very beautiful and very interesting. And you'll see other things that, because I feel like I have a little bit of an audience and a platform, that I can shine a light on things. And so I wouldn't say that they're ugly. I would say they're the things that people tend to shy away from or look past or look through. Homelessness is a big topic because I'm out on the street. I spend a lot of time outside on the streets working. And so I experience a lot of different people. Some people are very welcoming and they appreciate the work that I do. Other people, not so much. And I, experience all kinds of people, all socioeconomic levels. And I kind of pride myself, I think, coming from an architecture background. I had to sit in meetings with corporate executives, but I also had to go to construction sites and, try to speak a little Spanish and talk to the laborers, And so the Einstein quote always comes back to me as like, I talk to everybody the same, whether there's a janitor at the university or the president of the university, It's like everybody.
We all deserve to be treated equally. Yeah.
Well, and that was key to and instrumental in the work that I started to do, because I sort of started to come out of this funk that I was in as an observer.
Yeah.
I was observing my son, transform in front of my eyes. I was realizing that art was something that I could get behind and support for him as an actual career. My father always encouraged me. He said, it's great that you're a creative person, but he says, art is a hobby. It's not a profession. If you want to have a family, if you want to have a good life, you need to have a career. And that's why I became an architect, because it was the one career where I felt like I could be creative, but I could also
both worlds.
Yeah.
Still be able to fulfill that.
Exactly.
Because there's an itch. There's an inner itch inside of you you got to be able to get that creativity out. If you don't, it's just going to build up.
So when I started observing, that led to a kind of transition in the way I took photographs, because up until that point, I had photographed buildings, interesting architecture that I liked. And a lot of times I would wait until people got out of the way, like they walk, like sort of like the cars that drive by or the bus that pulls up in front of the demolishing, Georgia Dome.
Oh, yeah.
I would wait until I had the perfect photo of the building. And I had done a complete 180 to where now I was taking pictures of my son, working with these artists, the pictures of the artists, the pictures of the people in the community that were coming out to support what was being done, the volunteers. And I felt like this was different than what the rest of what I was seeing on social media.
Yeah.
And that's really where I started to formulate this idea of like social art, because what I realized is public art for a long time has meant permanence. It has meant a static sculpture, even a mural in some sense, but murals I would say are by nature less permanent pieces of public art, because as a community evolves and changes, quite often they change their murals, they paint over them. So I've been fortunate to have one in Cabbagetown now for a decade, which I think is a pretty long time.
That is impressive to have it that long.
Yeah.
Because walls, gosh, they change so quickly. And somebody comes in and new political or something says, that needs to be changed, or we need to change the image for this, or paint over it entirely.
That image has evolved over those 10 years too. Like it has transformed into many different messages. But for me, when I took that photograph, I was coming out of this dark place, and I was so excited to be, I think, interacting with people, and I was getting feedback from organizations like We Love ATL that had their Instagram community, that, you know, there was something authentic about the photography that I was doing, that it was capturing something real about these people. I didn't get into the stories so much. So like about the time I'm doing this, Humans of New York appears, and it's, you
Yes.
know, it's a whole dialogue with the person. I didn't want to intrude that much on people, you know, and kind of bring up. I ended up having those conversations, but I didn't make it part of my post.
Yeah.
I almost wanted to treat it like poetry and add some words that maybe describe the person or the character of the image, but in a way that was more like literature than it, you know, than it was like you know, a biography or so. But the thing it was important to me at this time too is like I got rid of my car, you know, after the recession, and I started riding a scooter, because what I realized is I could stop
Stop and go.
anywhere and
Yeah.
take a picture, have a conversation. Like, I didn't have to worry about pulling my car over and parking it or anything. And so I really enjoyed that. And so for a good, like, I don't know, 4 or 5 years, I rode a scooter all over Atlanta, from far north Atlanta. Never made it out to Alpharetta or anything like that. Never got on the highway or anything, but
But
definitely.
you're in a city. You can easily get around on a
Right.
scooter. It's
I
it's
took my
built
wife
for it.
to our anniversary dinner one night on a scooter. We got all dressed up, and she had her high heels, like, you know, strapped to her purse, and we rode up to Buckhead, you know, and went to a nice restaurant. And
Maybe I can convince Katie to do it at some point. Maybe that, get the high heels strapped on. Katie's at some point gonna be like, yeah, no.
But what I found when I talked to people that I would photograph is that sometimes, you know, I was on my way somewhere and I'd be late, or, you know, I probably spent a little more time talking than I probably should have. But I never felt like it was a waste of my time, or that I had not received something from those people and those conversations that wasn't equal to what I was giving with my time, you know? And there was definitely in my photography of people that idea, and sort of where the crown came into play, is that like Basquiat would use the crown, you know, which he got really from graffiti and street art, as a symbol of importance for somebody, you know, respect for
Yes.
someone. And that, in his case, it was for, you know, African American athletes, musicians, you know, people that, you know, were at the top of their game, but still being treated as less than in our culture. And so I felt this was kind of parallel in a way, because I'm stopping to talk to people on the street, some of which are living on the street, and but I'm trying to see them in that light of like, this person, you know, has a mother, maybe has a brother or a sister, you know, maybe has children, you
Yeah,
know, but
exactly.
something has happened in their life, you know, that has led them to this moment. But it doesn't mean that everything before that didn't have importance, and it doesn't mean
Amen.
that they should just be disregarded or treated like trash, essentially, you know, and thrown away by our culture. Like, taking some time and getting to know somebody and understand their story, you know, like, it's important to me, but I feel like it's important for them to have the opportunity to share that.
Yes.
And I sort of felt like if I could change somebody's spirit, and I kind of felt I was doing some free art stuff at this time too, and I was actually printing out photos, because nobody was printing photos anymore. They were just sharing them on social media. So I was printing photos out like they were little Polaroids, and I would leave them at the places where I took the photo, or I would give them to the person if I could track them down. And, you know, I did a project with We Love ATL for Elevate one year, where we basically took their feed and we projected it on the side of the parking deck across from the Rialto Theater, you know, at mega scale.
Yes.
So instead of
I remember
standing there looking at your phone, you were looking at their images, enormous, you know. And in my mind, it was like this idea of like when you were at the Grand Canyon and you're in all of it, you know, like
You're trying to soak it all in.
when you're just
Yeah.
scrolling through photos, they really start to lose their meaning.
It's
But
true.
when you're looking at it at that scale, it does something, I think different in the way you perceive it.
Which is why I think movie theaters still hold their presence of being able to, rather than sitting on your TV at home, you're sitting on the bigger screen. It has that different kind of like
One of my
connection
first
for it.
jobs was in a movie theater, so I'm all on board when it comes to keeping the movie theaters going.
Yes. Now you mentioned your crown. How did you get that name, Joe King ATL?
So, if I recollect in this story I tell, sometimes I tell stories so much I don't know whether they're real anymore or not, or if I've just embellished them so much. But I was working on that very first Living Walls in 2013 with an artist, Louis Lambert, who goes by 3TT Man down in Summerhill. And he was telling me like, "Oh man, you're the best, you're the king." And I thought it was kind of cool because I grew up in a house where my mom only listened to Elvis, and
Oh,
so,
nice.
and I used to dress up like Elvis and put on concerts. I had a really terrible singing voice, but I had a dream.
Yeah. Love it.
And so I thought it was really cool. And then I think someone must have heard him calling me that. And then knowing my first name was also Joe, they said, "Oh, hi, you must be Joe King." And I was like, "Well, I am now."
Yep. There we go. That's how it takes.
So yeah, I don't know if that came before my Instagram handle. Probably. I think at that point I might have changed it from Joe Dreher to Joe King ATL. And yeah, and so I thought it was interesting because in what I was learning about street art and graffiti and the kind of history of that, Kings, and Martha Cooper talks about this, who's one of the early documentarians of graffiti, that, a king is someone at a high level in the community of street artists or in the community of graffiti artists. And you're not elected or anointed a king. You just have to call yourself one. And then you have to live up to it. And I felt that was an interesting thing. And and I I don't know the order of it too, like Joe King ATL, it's me, it's who I'm trying to be or live up to, and it's where I'm trying to do it, and the community that
Exactly.
is
ATL.
inspiring me. And it still seems valid today. Many people have said, "What is that, Joe King ATL? You need to get rid of that and just, go by your name, or you need to find something that people understand better, or why is it in all caps?" Because some people will try to divide it up into 3 words, and then they'll capitalize the first letter of each word. And
Yeah, that's what I did.
Yeah.
That's what I did. Whatever, I was writing down the outline. My bad.
But, I was meeting artists that were named like Never 2501 or Faith 47 or
Yeah.
JR, and so I felt like, how's that any
You
different?
got to have yours. What I want to know is really what inspired you to become this artist that you are today? Because you said you started feeling this kind of stuff at a young age. What inspired you to start actually pursuing the arts in your mind that were there?
Well, my son Alex, really, like I saw it as an opportunity for me to, do what I was passionate about doing, like I realized that I enjoyed being outdoors. I enjoyed being with people. When I was a kid, like I was a skater and a surfer, all the solo kind of sports. But I never, like I would be outside all day long until the streetlights came on, and
Yeah.
then I would go home, and that's how I grew up. And so I had spent, several decades between college and then working as an architect, just, absorbed by my profession.
Mm-hmm.
Because architecture is one of those professions where it becomes your life. Well, all professions, I guess, have the ability to do that. But, you hang out with other architects, you go to lectures about architecture, you take planned vacations to go see architecture,
Yeah.
so it becomes every aspect of your life an image of the architect, working late nights and pulling all-nighters. And the architecture building at SCAD was the only building that was open 24 hours a day, and there was always people in it. And what I had the opportunity to realize through what happened to me with the recession and this depression was that it's not the only thing in my life that
Yeah.
I can define myself by or feel successful through. that I could be successful, as a husband, as a father, as, a creative, that I could find that in other ways. And I saw it as an opportunity to show my children who had witnessed me go through this depression, this dark period.
Mm-hmm.
When I started doing this, it was like I hit the ground with such momentum and speed, it was like I was making up for lost time. I'd realized that I had wasted years of my life, feeling bad, feeling like I had failed in my career, failed in my, home life, failed as a husband, as a father, as a provider, as all those things, and you just feel, as a result, you feel useless and inadequate, and I'm sure, I got to some pretty dark places where I even may have felt like, would things be better if I wasn't here,
Yeah,
maybe.
and that's a hard one to come back from. I've
Yes.
experienced that world. It's hard.
Yes. And
That's never easy.
So I think when you're able to come out the other end of that and to find that thing that, saves you. And what I realized was it was not something that was geared towards, the success was not geared towards money. It was not geared towards some idea or conception of where I needed to be as an artist or anything. What I found with art was that everybody was on a journey of learning and improving their skills and their talent, and that there wasn't this hierarchy. I mean, there is a structure to the art world, like there is every other kind of
Everything has
world.
some kind of balance. It's been created by somebody or something.
Right.
Yeah.
But what I found in this community and in the artists that I was meeting from other communities was that, number one, I was inspired by their energy and excitement about what they were doing. I was inspired by my son and his interest in it. And I was inspired by the idea like that I really don't care whether I'm making money or not. I feel fulfilled as a human being.
And that is the biggest thing to chase of anything.
If you can achieve that success, then all the other things will start to fall into place, because you're just going to be a better, happier human being. And you're going to put out an energy in the world that is going to start to come back to you. And that's really what I've learned over this decade, is that I've been pouring and pouring and pouring out this energy, and I am feeling it come back, and I felt it in a big way when we lost our son, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
I literally had people that wanted to get on a plane and come from overseas to console us, as a family. And I said, stay where you're at. We're okay. We can feel it. It was palpable, the feeling of support and love and concern that we got from this community that we had built, through the arts. So,
and that's, the art is its own community,
right?
It is its own thing, and that's how really it can make that giant change for anyone, and that in any person or place or thing can experience and influence your creativity.
Yeah.
And just by you interacting with somebody down the street, perhaps maybe that will give you a whole entire new idea for an art piece, or they could become your art piece, as it has actually been for several of some of your pieces that I've seen.
That has been the case. And I think it's about opening yourself up. I often talk about this idea of flow. Like, I feel like when you open yourself up to receive that energy from other people, when you put it out, you get in this flow, and the universe sort of provides you what you need, and that can be very literal sometimes. And it can be also very kind of metaphysical, but I definitely feel like there have been moments where it's uncanny how I'll think I have something that I'm needing at the moment, or I need to happen. And then I go to sleep, and the next day I wake up and it's happened, or it's happening, or it's there. Yeah. So, and I could give you some examples of that if you're
go for it, dude. Let's go.
I
want to hear that. That's the creativity. That's the flow. That's like, I want to feel it.
So when I was in Italy recently, I was, meeting people in the community and drawing them. And I had a friend that I met there who's a journalist. He took me to introduce me to a friend of his who's a young woman who works at a scuba diving shop. And her daughter happened to be there with her at work because her husband was busy that day and she couldn't leave her at home. And so I drew a portrait of her on the window of the shop. I got her to stand inside, went outside and drew her on the shop window. And I made a print, I had some paper I think we might have used some paper that they had in the shop or a box or something. But anyway, I made a print for her. And then as a gift for me, she felt compelled to give me something. Although I told her, like,
No,
I
no,
do
you don't need
this,
to. Yeah.
this is something I do, it's free. Like, I don't expect anything, but she gave me a scuba mask.
Oh, wow.
And I was like, oh, that's nice. I'm not really a scuba diver. I might go snorkeling because we're right there in the Mediterranean. But then I go back to the apartment where I'm staying, and my college best friend, Max Dahlstrand, is waiting for me to come back so we can go swimming in the bay. And he's like, I forgot my scuba mask. I wanted to go snorkeling. And I was just like, well, here you go.
Well, the world says
just so
you need
happened.
this.
And, it's like, yeah, that's a coincidence. And, just all the right things fell into place. Or maybe it's just like being in that flow and, being in the right place at the right time with the right energy and, getting a gift that ends up being something that someone else needed, and
Not forcing it as well, just allowing it to be.
Yes.
What's the Ram Dass, be here now kind of deal, that the whole philosophy, just be here in the moment and it'll happen. So, whatever it's needing to tell you or do for you, as you mentioned earlier, it'll happen, just got to be willingness.
I mean, we're at a point in history where we can be anywhere in the world we want to be at any moment.
Oh my, it's so true. The dangerousness at the palm of your hand. It's so dangerous now.
And yes, not just virtually, but I mean, air travel, all that is affordable to the point where you can,
True. This is true.
Save a little money and go somewhere, and be, our parents, just a generation before us didn't have that much flexibility in their,
that's true. The cost
lives
of flying and just driving and getting around, and it's true.
Flying now is like riding the bus for our parents. It used to be glamorous, right? And now it's like going on a Greyhound, but
but it gets us there.
Yes, but it gets us there. And so, yeah, I mean, like, if you're here right now, basically what you're saying is that of all the places in this world that I could be, I've decided to be here and to spend this time with you. And so let's make the most of it, and that's the energy I try to bring when I'm engaging with people. It's just like, I'm giving you my full attention and I kind of expect it back from people. Not that I force it or I, push at it, but I want to encourage people to put down the phone, to focus on what they're doing at the moment. And that's where this Portrait Partners thing that I developed kind of comes from, is this idea of connectivity. I was asked to do an event early on, like after I painted that first mural in Cabbagetown.
Yeah.
Paint Love. It's another organization that has been really instrumental in my development and that I've been really supportive of since they're almost in inception. They asked me to do an event called Connections for foster children and the foster parents.
Oh, yay.
And so I had never had to create a project for anyone to do before, like an art project. So I went, like everybody does, and I Googled art projects and group projects and things like that. And what I was finding was, in my research, was that everything was focused around a group of people sitting in a space focused on an object. Whether it was a canvas or it was a piece of clay or it was decorating something or making a lantern, whatever it was, they were all together, but they still weren't together. They weren't connecting. They were connecting with an object. So I felt like this is no different than the phones or any of the other stuff, like what can I do to encourage two people to sit across from each other and look at each other and connect. And walk away from the experience feeling like I know that person a little bit better as a result, And so I had remembered a quote. Unfortunately, I don't remember who said it. It might have been the architect Corbusier, might even have been Picasso. I don't know, but it's like, to draw something is to know it, because you have to look at it, you have to study it, you see things in it that you don't just see in a glance. You really start, the longer you look at it, the more you discover about it. So I said, okay, if I could just get two people to sit across from each other and have them draw each other, then at the end of it, they'll know each other better. And what more
I
could you
love that
want
idea.
for a foster kid and a foster parent, right? Than to them feel like they know each other better. Also having, at this point in my life, being a father, being, being a little bit older than most of my peers in the art world that I was interacting with, I thought, well, first off, I was adopted. So I knew what it was like to be a foster child. My other son, Max, is on the autism spectrum. And I know in children, really all children, not just children on the spectrum, but their only real defense mechanism, because they're children, is to look away when they don't
Yeah.
feel comfortable, when they feel like, threatened, whatever it is, like they just look away. They may still talk to you, but they're not looking at you. They're not focused on you because they're afraid of that
That
connection.
connection is right there because they don't know what's next.
Right.
It's the uncertainty.
Right. And so again, like I felt if I can get these kids to look in the eyes of these foster parents, and maybe some of these foster parents for the first time to really look in the eyes of that child when they're talking to them,
Yeah.
It's like the Italians when you toast in Italy, and you say cheers. When we toast, we have a tendency to look at the glass for some reason. I think we're afraid that we're going to break it or we're
Yeah.
going to miss or something, like when you miss on a high five.
Highly plausible.
And but you're supposed to look the person in the eyes. And when you toast with each person around the table, you look each person in the eyes. And it's about that connection. And so what I experienced with this project, and at that name, I don't even think it had a name like Portrait Partners. That's something I want to say maybe Julie from Paint Love might have said. And then it kind of became a thing. So I probably should credit her for that. So what I realized though with this was, and it was unexpected for me because I thought, okay, well, this is basically like I'm putting up a picture frame with just the glass in it or the plexiglass in it. And the person is tracing the person's face through the glass, And then from my, research, I came across Andy Warhol's blotted line technique. When he was coming up in advertising, he was not the best illustrator, and he would trace a drawing with a fountain pen, and he would do it on like a piece of vellum or transparent paper. And before the ink of the fountain pen would dry, he would have it in a book and he would close the book and squash the drawing onto another piece of paper, and it would transfer the ink onto that paper, and it would be like a blotted line, which is just like an uneven, it's not a straight line. It's not a consistent line. It's just, like an amorphic shape line. So it's not perfect, right? And it's not going to be exactly what you drew. When you squeeze it together, it kind of oozes out in all directions. And so I felt like I'm going to be confronted with people that say, I'm not an artist. I don't know how to draw. And I'm going to say, well, it doesn't matter because, you can, and, unfortunately there are people that can't see, but, if you can see the person, you can follow their shape of their
Just general
face
shapes,
and, and draw the line. And what was interesting to me was it didn't become about the portrait and the print. It became about the interaction, right?
And that is so key.
And the print was sometimes they were goofy and abstract and awkward looking, and they made the person, look different. But there was always something about them that you could hold it up next to the person and recognize the person in it.
That is who it is. Yeah.
So there's this idea of likeness. You can make a likeness of someone that represents them. But what I realized is because the paint was taking a long time to dry on this paper, we were hanging them up on the wall to dry. And we tell people, come back and pick it up, when it's dry before you leave. But what we realized is now we weren't just making a portrait of individuals. We were making a portrait of a community of people.
Oh, yes.
And that's when I started to
collaboration
give this
right there
idea
is best.
some real validity, because the idea of like, oh, it's just tracing, like anybody can do it. That's the beauty of it, is anybody can do it. And the beauty of it is it connects not just the two people, but it connects the whole room of people, the whole community of people. So I did this project, probably the most kind of profound experience doing it. Oh, the other thing I got to say is the beauty of it was I didn't have to do any work. I would basically just show one person how to do it, and then they would do it with someone, and then someone would see them doing it, and they would sit down and do it. And so it
goes back to the whole biblical thing of like, teach a man to fish, you feed him for life.
Right.
That kind of deal.
And so I enjoyed that part of it as well. Not that I'm a lazy artist, but I
No, you were a
enjoy just
teacher.
yes,
And that's at the end of the day. And as a teacher, you want to see your students thrive and take your idea and move forward with it. That's the whole idea.
Exactly.
If you're having to repeat it over and over and over again, yes, it eventually may stick, but man, being able to see someone thrive with it is phenomenal.
At a time when we couldn't be together physically, like the pandemic,
Yes.
I saw that there was an opportunity to connect with people using this idea of this window that we're seeing each other through and drawing on. So as part of another organization, Art Fields, their annual competition in Lake City, South Carolina, I occupied a storefront, a retail storefront that was all glass, front facade. And I sat on one side of the glass on the inside, and people came up to the outside of the glass. And this is the point where people were coming back out, but everybody was still masked, or most of the people were masked.
Yeah.
And so I drew people through the glass, so that we weren't breathing the same air,
Yeah,
but we were still having connection. We were still interacting. And the people that did wear a mask, I would draw a face where the mask would, or a smile where the mask was. And so it was like, even though I couldn't see their mouth, I couldn't see their smile, I was still able to draw their smile, And some people I drew the mask on as well, but
it was kind of what you kind of felt at that time too, kind of in a way,
right.
Like you're feeling.
And so I was drawing people from like the 8 a.m. to 5 p.m. every day for 10 days.
Ooh.
And I filled up with the prints that I make off the glass. I filled up this empty retail space, the walls of this space, with over 300 portraits of the community. And then I went back a few months later after trimming those all down off the individual sheets. And then I grouped them closer together and made almost like this layered kind of parade of people that I could bring all together. So even though they couldn't be all together in one space when I drew them, I brought them all together through the drawings that we had done together. And that it built that idea of community that we were lacking in, but we were all starving and, hungry
thriving
for.
That we needed. Yeah.
And so obviously that was a really powerful, experience for me. My wife had assisted me on that project because, who else am I going to ask to share air with me?
That's true. At that time when uncertainty. Yeah.
And so it was powerful in that sense that she got to see me in action, really doing my thing and be a part of it. And we went home every night, at the end of the day. Well, what we would do is we would collect these portraits and leave them on the glass. So I'd make the print, I'd hang that on the wall. Sometimes I'd make an extra print if I could get a double, and I would give it to the person. And then at the end of the day, we would go eat dinner, and I would come back and I would add some kind of color or some kind of background to the window. So it tied all the portraits together in sort of like a, kind of mural. And then I would leave that overnight. And then the next morning, the first thing we would do is come in and wash the window off and start all over again.
Yeah.
So of course you get these metaphors of like, you're not the same person today that you were yesterday. Every day is a new beginning, all that. And so, and there was a moment I can remember one gentleman. Oh, usually I can remember their names, but in this case, I'm having a little trouble remembering it. He was someone I would call like an outsider in the community. He may have been homeless. He may have been struggling with some mental health issues, but he was pushing a shopping cart around every time I would see him in the community, but with nothing in it, just an empty shopping cart.
Yeah.
Almost like a security blanket kind of thing, and he would come by where we were doing, on Main Street where we were doing the portraits, and he would kind of stand across the street and he would just kind of look and see what was going on and kind of feel it out. And I noticed like, day after day, he would show up and he would kind of hang out for a little while, see what was going on. And I got the sense that he wanted to participate.
Yeah, he wanted to be there.
But didn't know how to make that step. Didn't have the courage or the...
You felt the vibe that he wanted to be a part of what you were doing, and you're just trying to figure out a way to be able to make that work.
So we broke the veil. Treasure went outside. She went up and asked him, like, would you be interested in letting Joe draw your portrait? And he said yes.
Oh, that's so
And
cool.
he came up to the window and I put him right on the door, like the center of all the portraits. And I actually did a full body portrait so that I could include the cart in the
Yes.
drawing.
Because
And
that's
then
an important part of who he is.
exactly. And then I, made the prints and I rolled them up and I gave them to him and he took them off in his cart, so he had something in the cart when he left. But we went home and, we cried afterwards because, we felt like here's someone who doesn't feel necessarily connected, even more so than just because of a pandemic, but just
Yeah.
because of the state that he's in, or, the situation that he's found himself in, doesn't feel comfortable being part of the community, feels marginalized maybe, and so, but had the interest, had the desire, and had the willingness and openness to allow me to draw him.
And that's being very vulnerable with another individual that way.
Super vulnerable to be
super
standing
vulnerable.
there and in a crowd of people, all watching, me draw him, was, yes, like really putting himself out there. And yeah, like, those are the moments that I live for, those, are the moments that you sort of have to see coming,
Yeah.
I always say too, like being a father really prepared me for the social art that this term that I use, because it's sort of like you have to predict the future when you're a parent, because your kids are doing something and you're like, oh, they're going to fall off of that, or they're going to hurt themselves if they keep doing that. And so you're constantly like looking at situations and determining like, okay, I need to intervene here. I need to do something now before it happens.
Yeah.
Which, if you're a photographer or if you're somebody who's engaging with people, it's a great skill to have, to sort of see where things are leading and then put yourself in the right position to either get that image that you're trying to get, or to, approach that person in the right way, or just to have that kind of interaction and sort of anticipate the way it might go, And then it's always, random what ends up happening, but at least you've kind of seen the opportunity and you've tried to seize it.
And to be able, and that's, oh, and okay, that was 10 days long, you said, correct? That you were there on?
Oh yeah. I think 9 or 10 days.
Wow.
Yeah. It was a little longer than a week. It's
And so
the
you
length
left
of
with
art
about
fields.
what, how many pieces did you wind
Over
up leaving with?
300 portraits we drew. Yeah.
That's insane to be able to think that within that period of time and all the people kind of going by. And I bet, how many would you do in a day? Like if you're looking at technically, that's about 30
like
if you did the
30 a
math
day,
in a day.
Yeah.
Be able to do that. And how did you keep how do you keep your hands and all the stuff kind of like going? And
Yeah,
that's a lot.
we were getting to the point where we go home at night and soak our feet,
Well, yeah.
Again, it's about that energy, it's like, it is like, adrenaline, but it's also just feeding off of that energy and those events that happen, those connections that are made, like it just makes you want to keep going. So even as the day is kind of winding down and I'm getting exhausted, like I really want to stay and draw all the people that have waited to be drawn, and so I
Because
try.
they've waited for that. They want
Yeah.
that connection.
Right. And so, and I have people that come up and say, oh, how much do I owe you for the drawing, or can I pay you, to draw my husband or whatever? And I'll say, well, if your husband wants to wait until I've drawn, everybody in the queue, then I will draw them. But there is no charge, because that's the other thing about this project is I've done it at corporate events and other kind of events where I've had the opportunity to get paid for it.
Yeah.
I don't mind charging, a corporation or some, using our grant or something to pay for it. But the idea is that it's for everyone, that it's about taking away barriers, not putting barriers up. As soon as you start asking for money or charging a fee, you've put a wall up,
Yep.
and I can remember being in a situation where I didn't have the money, to buy portraits for my whole family or something, or even of myself. And so the idea that, historically a portrait is something for the privileged, for the upper class, for the people that can afford to hire someone to do it. And even like a character on the street isn't usually for free, you know, like when you go places, you know,
They want to be able to have
they
something back from
want
it.
it. And I'm not saying the artist shouldn't get paid for the work. I try to get paid, but from those corporations or from whoever is
Yeah.
sponsoring the event. In this case, I got paid through Art Fields, you know, but that allows me to offer it for everyone.
And so
And
being able, how did you find art fields, or how do art fields find you? That's what I'm curious, trying to make the
yeah,
connection here.
that's an
Like,
interesting story too, because my son Alex, after Living Walls, and you know, we were looking for other ways to keep him active in the art world. Lionel Flax from Sam Flax Art Store, who was a big sponsor of Living Walls and the arts in general, and a big supporter of Atlanta art scene, he suggested that we get Alex involved in a program called One Love Generation that was out at the goat farm. And so we were spending, you know, a couple times a week out at the goat farm, and as a result, meeting all kinds of other artists and stuff too. But he connected with an artist named Rory Hawkins, who goes by Catlanta, who's
okay.
really big in the free art scene here and is a mural painter. And him and Alex work together a lot. He assisted Rory on several of his mural projects. And so I wanted to give back for that experience. And so I applied for the Creatives Project, who were the artists that were mentoring these young artists. Unfortunately, for whatever reason, I don't know, the year that I was chosen to be part of it, they decided to have their annual event, their exhibition, be a ticketed event. And one of the things that has been important to me since the beginning of calling myself an artist or making this social art is the idea that there are no barriers, that is for
Yes.
everyone. It is accessible to everyone. That's something that I experienced with Living Walls. That's something I experienced with Glow, you know, that there were no barriers. And I often feel in the art world, with public art and with the art that's in museums and galleries, not everybody feels comfortable going into a white box with
True.
white walls and looking at abstract, you know, in many cases, artwork on the walls and feeling like, oh, I don't really understand this. You know, I must not have the right education, or I might not be in the right social circles, you know, or, you know, like, to me, that's like defeating the purpose of the art that
Well,
I
the whole
want to
point,
be
yeah, exactly what
involved
you're
in.
wanting with the social art aspect. Yeah.
And being at the age I'm at too, I'm also not influenced by, you know, people that might say, oh, well, you know, like, you're being difficult, or you're being one of these artists that, you know, isn't easy to work with, or whatever, you know. And I'm like, no, I just know what's important to me. And I'm at an age where I'm willing to stand my ground and not, you know, cave because I feel the pressure of someone maybe more important in the art world at a given time, you know, telling me like, you know, you're not making the right decisions, or you're not, this isn't good for your career, or, you know,
Yeah.
where I'm bringing all these museum directors and gallery owners and things together to see your artwork, where I'm like, you know what? I really don't give a bleep. The work isn't for them, you know, that I'm doing,
Yes.
you know?
I
And
love
those are
that.
the people I want to come to the opening. Those are the people I care about coming to the opening. So if you have a ticketed event and that puts up a barrier for these people, and for the people that I'm working with, in many cases, that's a big barrier,
Yeah.
especially if you want to bring your family with you, you know,
It adds up fast.
it adds up really
Gosh, it
fast.
does.
And I can remember being in that situation where I was struggling financially during the recession, and I couldn't go, you know, see art in a museum, or I couldn't go, you know, somewhere that I had to buy tickets for my whole family, you know. So I did not want that to be a part of my work. And so I made it very clear that I wasn't going to participate if that was the case. And so I ended up having to leave that, you know, opportunity. And it's sad that we weren't able to come to some kind of working agreement, you know,
Yeah.
but it didn't work out. And so I had created work for this exhibition, and I decided to remove it, you know, before the exhibition started. and it sat in my driveway for, a few months while I tried to figure out,
Oh, wow.
where I was going to present this work, because it was sort of made for a specific, site,
Oh, okay.
for this exhibition. So Sarah Higgins from Art Papers called me up and said, "Hey, I'm judging this thing called Art Fields. It's a competition for Southeastern artists. Um, it's a public art thing, it's indoors, outdoors, but it's in this small town, Lake City. It's sort of like Art Prize, which I know a little bit about, but I've never participated in that. And she said, I think this would be a good opportunity for you to show those
Oh, the
pieces.
pieces. Yeah. Finding a home.
And so these pieces were portraits of 3 kids that I worked with that were part of an organization called Street Smart Kids that's over on the west side of Atlanta. And it's like an after school program to keep these kids doing, creative things after school, and to help keep them, street smart and not
Yeah.
get in trouble, because it's easy in some of these communities to get
Unfortunately.
mixed up with the wrong,
Really
crowd and
unfortunate.
stuff. And
That is the perfect place that we're going to take a pause in this conversation with Joe King ATL, because this is another hour left that will be able to come back in 2 weeks. You can be able to listen to that as we continue this lovely bits of time together that I get to spend down in the 4th Ward with him. In the meantime, if you would like to reach out to me, I have an email address, which is cade, C-A-D-E, at learningfromfriends.com. I have a Twitter page, Facebook page, Instagram page, LinkedIn page that all can be found as Learning from Friends Podcast. There is a website, www.learningfromfriends.com, which you can be able to reach out that way as well. And if you would like to, I have a Patreon page where you could be able to go in and donate at, say, the $5, $25, $100 levels to be able to help contribute towards the podcast. So feel free to do that as well. That'd be much appreciated. I will also have links below for you to be able to reach out to Joe King ATL if that is something that you would like to be able to do as well. Follow his artwork and follow his amazing social art that is out there in the world. Now, when you come back in 2 weeks, when we pick up in this conversation, it'll have the very much continued same vibe that we had during this one. So come back in 2 weeks and check in with us. But until then, as we leave out today, my name is Cade Curtis, your tour guide in this lovely adventure that I like to call Learning from Friends. And most of all, don't forget to let your curiosity fly high.